Hello, everyone.
Hi, happy Sovereign Sunday.
Happy Sovereign Sunday. It has been a while. So thanks for joining us after such a long hiatus. I think it's been about a month or maybe even 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's been a while. We've been on a bit of a vacation.
A bit of, I don't even know if you could call it a vacation, but certainly a bit of an adventure.
Yes.
We've had lots of adventures since the last time we spoke, and some good, some challenging.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us after so long. We appreciate you coming back and checking in with us.
And as you know, whenever we're back, it's because we have a great story.
Yes, absolutely. So the topic of today's show. We're going to be talking about the Temazcal, or also known as Sweat Lodge. And we're going to talk about not just our experiences with it, but some of the medicinal benefits of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I found, for me personally, it was a really powerful and challenging experience. And it ties in a lot to the ice baths, which I've shared a little bit about in past videos. So do we want to just jump right in, or do you have anything?
Sure.
You want to share? If you have any questions about Sweat Lodge, please feel free to drop them in the comments, and we will try and answer as many questions as possible.
And answer them as best as we can from our knowledge and perspective, and what we've learned so far, because we're pretty new to the Sweat Lodge healing ceremonies. Yesterday was my first Sweat Lodge experience. This was Danny's second.
So we're not claiming that we're experts on this. We're just sharing what we've been taught. Hopefully this show was a little bit last minute. We didn't want to keep going without having another show. So hopefully on our next show, we might be able to bring the medicine man in who created the Sweat Lodge ceremony for us and facilitated it, because he really can share so much more than we can. And he's just a beautiful medicine man. And I think he just has so much medicine to share that I think it would just be awesome to have him on the show.
Yeah.
Either way, to talk about lots of different things. So do you want to talk about, let's describe what the Sweat Lodge actually is?
Sure.
You could talk about, if you want, I can describe the physical aspects of it, and then you can talk about kind of where it originated from in Mexican tradition.
Okay.
Doesn't only come from Mexican tradition. Lots of indigenous cultures have a Sweat Lodge practice, but the Sweat Lodge that we experienced was from the Mexican tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So we can talk about that. I actually, last week, was my first Sweat Lodge, and that was in the Lakota tradition, which is extremely similar. It's very similar, very few differences, at least in the physical aspect. So I've also got some videos to share, which, is cool. Puts a little bit of instead of me just talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to the first video. So the first part of the ceremony is to actually build the fire. So what we're doing is we're piling up all this wood, and then we put the stones. The Temazcal requires stones. So you're not actually setting a fire inside of it's a tent, or they call it lodge. And I can show you that as well. This is the inside of the lodge. So you can see that there's the branches kind of form the structure of the dome. And then it's usually covered with, in a lot of indigenous tribes, they use a plant material. So they use leaves, or they weave together grass, and do different things and layer them on top of each other. And the idea is that the lodge is supposed to be completely dark. No light is supposed to enter in. What this is a recreation of a womb. So it's kind of the idea of going back to the womb and being reborn. And so some modern sweat lodges for the sake of saving plant material, they use blankets. And both of the lodges that I was a part of, they use blankets. So you can see that the structure is covered with blankets. There's garland, the red garland around I believe there's medicine inside those little pouches. There are different herbs and things like that. So inside of the pit in the middle is where the hot stones go. So we create the fire, and then give me 1 second. Let me get this other. Huh.
We're having technical difficulties.
How do I go back to this? All right, here we go. All right. So what we do is we layer the stones on top of like the first pillar of fire, the firewood that we first saw, right? In the last video, layer the stones, and then we cover it with more wood. And there's the lodge there in the back. And there's our medicine man, Oso. And then once the stones are hot, that burns for, probably about an hour. I know some in the Lakota tradition, the stones that we did last week, they had them burning for a few hours in the fire. So, I mean, they really get hot. The stones are glowing red when they bring them in. And so we enter the lodge, we say our prayers as we go into the lodge. And there's different traditions. This was a feminine lodge, and I'm not clear on why this lodge was a feminine energetic lodge as opposed to the masculine. And there's different ways. For the feminine, you come in counterclockwise. Everybody enters. They go around the circle to the end in a semicircle, in a counterclockwise. And then for the masculine, it's in a clockwise. So last week in the Lakota lodge, we went clockwise. So we all went in one at a time and go around the circle until we fill up the lodge. Do you know why? Did he mention this?
I just know he mentioned about the direction it was facing. So because it was facing a particular direction, it was a feminine lodge.
Okay.
But he didn't really go into what other aspects, like how it differs from what would be considered a masculine. I think it's just the energy because of the direction that it's facing in. This was my first, like I said, my first Temazcal, my first sweat lodge. Also is of the Mexica tradition, the Aztec tradition. And from what I understand, these are practices that have been going on for hundreds of or thousands of years, and it's a purification ritual. In the Mexica tradition, the purification rituals were daily. They were having daily sweat lodges. Every home had a temazcal, and the intention was every day to purify. And so the idea is you're going into like this womb portal. It's completely dark, like Danny says. Once they close that doorway, they have the stones in there, everybody's seated, and it's completely dark. They splash water with some herbs onto the stones, and that creates steam. And then we take turns saying our prayers, our intentions, our gratitude practice in the same order, the counterclockwise order. And there are medicine songs that are sung during each each
round.
Yeah, each phase of the sweat lodge. It's 4, or we went through 4. I don't know if there are generally more than that.
With the Lakota last week, it was also 4, and usually it's, I believe, for each direction.
Right.
The 4 directions.
So there were 4 rounds, and each one is a little bit more intense because after 2 rounds, they put more stones in, if I'm not mistaken. And it's really interesting to hear the sounds, to hear the medicine man talks. He speaks he talks us through the ceremony, and there's a lot of wisdom shared. When we open with our intentions, it's interesting because you're in the dark now. It's hot. It's completely dark. It's hot. You're having you're practicing your breath in this intense heat, and it does create a sort of mental clarity. At least for me, I felt like my mind kind of expanded a little bit with the heat, with the intensity of being in this space in complete darkness. And it's interesting because I'm very claustrophobic, and I was a little bit worried about how I would feel in there, like kind of being in there, having this feeling of if I have to get out, I have to ask them to stop the ceremony to let me out. And I was like, oh my God, that's going to be embarrassing if I have to do that.
A little bit of positive peer pressure.
But, and those things tend to make me really anxious, right? If I feel like I'm stuck somewhere, I can't go anywhere. What if it gets too hot? And I know I felt very safe. Both Oso and his wife, Aga, are very, very, they are just amazing.
They're very gentle and conscientious and very good at making you feel comfortable.
Yes. They're very supportive throughout the entire process. So, I mean, the whole process of creating the fire, of putting the rocks on the fire, of setting the intentions, even when putting the rocks in the fire, right? You set intentions and you say your prayers to each of the directions, to the celestial realms, to Mother Earth as well. And so it's this beautiful process where you're coming together with all of nature. And I think that we are lacking that a lot in our society. We tend to not have this very deep communication with nature. So to be in this space, to honor all of the directions, to honor the earth, to honor all of the realms, while you're going into the sacred space, there's something very unifying about the whole process. Do you want to talk about your first experience last week?
Yeah. So I do not have as much discipline and strength as my wife does. The Temazcal experience for me was much more challenging. So last week I went to San Diego to Sacred Sons Convergence, which is a men's work. I hesitate to call it a retreat because it's not like a retreat where you're resting and recharging and relaxing, although there are recharging aspects of it. It's more of in some ways, it's like a hero's journey sort of thing. It's not quite a vision quest, but when you go to these Sacred Sons events, they're really pushing you to the edge, to your edges. And the Temazcal was just one way that I was challenged. So I love the heat. I'm very at home. I love, with hot temperatures, and I love the sun. And so, if you watch my ice bath video, I talked about how I wanted to do the ice bath because I hate the cold. And let's wait for this siren. We're not in the woods anymore. So I hate the cold. And for me, it was a big challenge to jump into the ice bath, like to do something that I knew was going to make me so uncomfortable. I did not expect the sweat lodge to be the same. I thought, oh, this is going to be cool. I'm going to go in, I'm going to sweat out some toxins, and this is going to be great. Like, I was excited and looking forward to it. When I got into the lodge, first of all, there was probably about 15, I don't remember exactly how many people, but it was about 15 to 20 people maybe in my first lodge. So there was very little room to move. So you want to talk about claustrophobic. I would not have survived that, I think. One of the panicking stories that my ego was telling me was that, what if somebody else panics? Even if you keep it together, what if somebody else panics and like pushes past you and knocks you into the rocks as they're trying to flee the lodge? Like, these are the thoughts that you start to go through, that start going through your mind. And I think that's all part of the process. It's about bringing your mind and your ego and your body, everything into alignment in a calm, and like maintaining that calm through it, so it's not like, and I would end up judging myself like, oh, you're having all these thoughts, you're worried about somebody trampling you, and oh, are you going to throw up? Oh, are you going to, what's going to happen? Are you going to get sick? Are you going to puke all over the rocks and embarrass yourself in front of everybody? Literally, these are all the ideas that are going through your head. And I think that's the purpose of it. From a psychological perspective, I think that's the purpose, to be able to have these thoughts, but not act on them, to let them pass through, to be like, oh, be patient with yourself. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, that's something to be worried about. Like it's okay that you have that thought. It's okay that you have that worry, but we're not going to let that fear of that control us. We're fine. We're at peace. We're going. And I struggled a lot through it. And a lot of that resistance needs to come out, and that's being purged. So as the heat is, I mean, within the first few minutes, you are soaked, dripping. Your eyes are blurry. I mean, not that you could see anything anyway, because it's pitch black, but your eyes are burning from the sweat, and it's everywhere. Sometimes, like for me, there was snot coming out, like everything was leaking.
And I think it's really interesting. I wanted to just go back to what you were saying about the thoughts and kind of like the purge of those thoughts. And because you're in this really dark place and it's so hot, the thoughts are more obvious. And I think that we have these thoughts all day long, and we're not really fully aware of them. But when you're in total darkness, there's nothing else there. Like, all those thoughts become so obvious, like they're front and center. You can't miss them now. And I think that's such a beautiful and exciting thing. I mean, some of the thoughts are really ridiculous, but you also realize how ridiculous they are because you're in this space.
So Liza's asking, how long were we in there? Honestly, for my first lodge, I have no idea. The time just like becomes irrelevant.
Slips away.
And you're praying that time speeds up, but I feel like that alone makes it slow down. Yesterday we were in the lodge. I mean, I have to say probably 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think it was close to 2 hours yesterday. I don't think my first lodge was that long, but it's hard to say. So for the first 2 rounds, I really felt like it was a struggle for me to get through. And so by the time the third round came, some people were sharing. They were sharing their prayers and sharing some reflections. And I was inspired by another man's share. And I was like, okay, I can be in gratitude for this experience. And the energy completely shifted. And now I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, this really is beautiful. And I can feel and be in gratitude for the experience and what it's teaching me. And I got to that place, and I was so excited that I got to that place, and then I wobbled. Abraham Hicks calls it a wobble, when your vibration starts to wobble a little, like you're in that gratitude. And then all of a sudden, my ego came in and judged me and said, oh yeah, you're in so much gratitude, and this is so great, and like you're in acceptance. Well, then why are you on the ground? So in the sweat lodge, you're in a dome, and we know heat rises. So the coolest place is the ground. So my face was to the ground. Like I was as low as I could get, being that I was surrounded by people. I was as low as I possibly could get. And my ego said, you're so holy, you're so enlightened. Why are you on the ground? You should stand up. There wasn't room to stand up, but I got up on my knees, and I went like this, and immediately was hit by this like intense heat that made me so dizzy that at that point I felt like I'm going to puke right now. Luckily, it was a few seconds later that they opened the lodge door. That round was over. And I was like, respectfully, I have to leave. And I crawled out, and never was I so thankful for the cool air outside. But, that for that round, and, I'm in acceptance. I was not ready to complete the lodge at that time last week. So then when we were invited to do this lodge yesterday, I was excited because I was like, okay, I want to be more at peace this time, and I want to try to make it through the whole lodge. and to really push myself again. So, yeah, it was a really, the first lodge I learned a lot from.
And I think that that's one of the lessons too, right? Of being in that type of situation and not being able to make it through, but recognizing the lesson of it, right? Of saying, okay, yeah, I see, when Danny came back and was talking to me about it, and he was like, I was on my knees, and I thought, oh yeah, well, how much of a sacrifice is it really if you're on the ground, right? And I was like, wow, like your ego had a really intense story right there.
Yeah.
This really you're not doing good enough, this unworthiness story. And so that was a huge lesson in that ceremony, right? Even if you think, wow, I didn't make it through the whole thing, but a huge lesson came out of that. And, we had this conversation yesterday. So Liza was like, wow, it's a lot, right? But there are breaks. So you're in there for a while. They open the door. You don't get out. They just open the door. So they allow the breeze to come in a little bit. We talk, we take a break. It's after the third round, I think we had a break with water and some fruit. So there are breaks, but you're in there, for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And
let me tell you, the breeze coming into the lodge is like the grace of God. It really is. I mean, I say that it's not a joke. I don't even mean it as like a cute way. Like, no, it's like feeling that relief is like God saying, okay, you're doing a good job, and here's a little bit of fresh air for you.
It feels like a hug from the universe, from God.
Yeah, it's really the gratitude for something as simple as a breeze.
Yes.
Is so like it changes you. It's like that in itself is like a lesson.
Yeah.
It's so profound.
Hi Trisha. She says she helped build Temazcal sweat lodges and prepare for ceremonies. But when it came down to it, she got nervous. About being that vulnerable around others. It's
a lot
really,
of vulnerability.
It's really intense. Liza was asking, are you supposed to interact with others? It's the person facilitating the sweat lodge, the shaman, the medicine person. When you come in, we start with the prayers, the opening prayers. Everybody goes around and says their prayers, and then it's just them singing the rest of the time. So they're singing medicine songs while you're just quietly allowing. And that's really what it is, being in a practice of allowance, right? For me, one of the big things that I felt was it's really difficult. It's hot. It's dark. You're like, sweat is just pouring everywhere. It's like everything is slippery. Like part of me was like kind of balled up, and then my arms were like sliding down my legs. And it's like practicing breathing that like thick hot air. And so it's really, really difficult, but at the same time feeling like, yes, I am in the womb of the earth. Like Mother Earth has me. She's holding me. I accept, I allow that. I allow her to take any of the toxins that my body needs to let go of. And I just felt so much gratitude for that, so much gratitude for how much the earth can hold, right? How much the earth is there to carry you, right? That you can lay down on the ground and it's cool. Mm-hmm. The coolness of the earth is there to get you through even the darkest of moments, right? Mm-hmm. And that was like super impressive to me. Even just having my hand on the ground at some point felt good. I was like, yes, this feels really good. I know that there's, no matter where I am, there's safety. I'm not afraid of any of it. And I made it most of the lodge sitting up. In the very last round is when they put all the rest of the rocks in. So they put, I believe, 9 rocks.
I believe it was 7. In the Lakota Lodge, it was 7, and it represents the 7 grandfathers.
And yesterday, it was 9.
It was 9?
Yeah. So they put the 9 rocks, and then at the end, they put all of the rest of the rocks, so it's hotter. when they put the water, the water on it, it creates a lot more steam. And he did it a couple of times, so the steam intensified, and it was really, really, really intense. And at that point, towards the very end, I put my head on the ground also, and I was like, oh my God, this feels so good. I feel so held. I was in so much gratitude. And so at the end of the last round, we expressed gratitude in that moment for the experience, for the ceremony. And I had so much gratitude for the earth, again, for reminding me, because I know this. I've had this experience through plant medicines of understanding that Mother Earth is there to take on whatever I can't handle, that I can always hand it back to her, and that she'll take it from me, and that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask my mom to help me, right? So to have that experience helped me remember that. I knew that, and I had forgotten, or, it wasn't as present. So to be there in that moment, I felt that immense gratitude. I felt gratitude for my ancestors. I am also a descendant of the Mexica people, and I'm grateful that my ancestors have had these traditions, and that they've been passed on through generations, even despite efforts to eradicate these traditions. So that the fact that they've survived, I was extremely grateful. I was grateful for the people that I was in the sweat lodge with. They're my family, obviously my husband, but the others that were in the group with us, the medicine teachers, our friend Jason, who was the one that invited us to the sweat lodge. I was like, we're family, we were reborn together. And it's such an intense feeling, that feeling of being reborn, of coming out a new person, because you've let go of all of those things. Believe it or not, those toxins are blockages. They're blockages to the way you breathe, through the way you, when the fruit was passed around afterwards, it felt so sweet and so delicious. And obviously, when we have all of these toxins, they're kind of blocking our taste buds. They're blocking the way the nourishment enters our body. So to kind of come out a different person, released, after having let go of all of these things, all of these blockages, you feel things differently. Like Danny says, you walk out, the air feels different, the sun feels different. Every single thing in nature feels completely different, looks more vibrant even. So it's just such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And I felt extremely grateful after the fact.
Yeah. Derek, thank you so much. Derek's inviting us to go to a Choctaw Nation sweat lodge. That would be amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah,
yes.
We would love to. Thank you. Liza is asking, do you have to be invited? I believe so, but if you put out that intention into the universe and just pray for an invitation and kind of nurture that desire that you want to do that, then I think the universe will provide. So
there are different places also. I mean, I know that there are places in Mexico, or resorts or retreats, where they offer that. They offer sweat lodges. I think you can definitely check in your area. I'm sure there are people that now these traditions are coming out and becoming available to just about everybody. I think for some Native American traditions, you do have to be invited to it. But I know for the Temazcal, that's becoming more and more available. People put out information on Facebook, on social media, that they have spots open for sweat lodges. So I would definitely check in your area and see what's available.
And then Jen says that her doctor recommended this for her daughter. So let's talk about some of the medical benefits, I guess, of it.
Yeah. There's definitely, there's the releasing of the toxins in your body. This is, I mean, for me, I've struggled with issues with my hormones for many, many years. So I was really excited to do this. I had heard about this from people in Mexico. My mom had told me, especially for me, I'm trying to keep my body warm, to keep my womb warm. In traditional Chinese medicine, as well as Mexican traditional medicine, there's a huge emphasis on keeping the body warm, right? Our digestive system, all of our internal organs, they need to flow. And we as a society, we have a habit of eating a lot of cold things, drinking a lot of cold drinks, right? You go out to have drinks, there's a ton of ice in everything. We have ice in just about every drink. And that slows down your digestive system and it creates cold in the body. A lot of women experience cramping as a result of the cold in our bodies because things aren't flowing as naturally. So going into a sweat lodge, you're warming up your entire body, you're releasing toxins, your blood is flowing more freely. Your pores open up. It's great. I suffer from cystic acne. So this, my skin felt amazing after the fact. And even during the sweat lodge, they passed around some honey for us to drink and to put all over our bodies. So it's like a really great treatment for your skin and your hair. So there's so many more amazing benefits. It helps with inflammation. And just your mind. I think a lot of things, it's very hard to hear this when you have chronic health issues, but a lot of it has to do with your mind. And for many years, Danny used to say this to me also, like, it's all in your mind. And I would get so angry at him because Danny wasn't as empathetic in his delivery of it. But
my delivery was terrible.
But the truth is, a lot of it is in our minds. So when you go into a place to experience a sweat lodge or an ice bath, if that's something that feels more in alignment with your beliefs, a lot of it is about mastering your mind. And when you start mastering your mind in these situations, it becomes easier to master your mind outside of those situations. You can go back to that. If I can handle a sweat lodge, if I can handle an ice bath, I can handle just about anything. If I can breathe through it, I can breathe through anything. And that's one of the things that we've been learning through the ice baths, through our work with healing ceremonies, is the importance of breath. And a lot of us don't have a breath practice. We've been working on being a little bit more consistent and having a morning breath practice. Doing breath work in the morning gets oxygen into all of your cells, and your cells can do their job when they are fully nourished. And a lot of these, both the ice bath and the Temazcal, there's a huge focus on the breath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, breath is life for humans, or for mammals. So I don't think that this, like, we could put enough emphasis on this. Controlling your breath, deepening your breath, right? When we're unconscious, when we're just kind of going through life, and yeah, we breathe because our reptilian, cerebral cortex is telling our body, breathe, breathe, breathe. We're on that rhythm, right? But we've kind of forgotten how to breathe. We breathe very shallow. So we're not really getting as much oxygen. So we have a lot of stale oxygen. So when you do a breathwork practice in the mornings, especially when you first wake up, I mean, you won't need coffee anymore. You're flooding your system with fresh oxygen, and your body comes alive. And I do not practice this the way I would like to, and we're working on that. We're working on developing a more consistent practice with it. But I have felt the benefits doing the ice baths, doing the Temazcal. I have felt the benefits of completely flooding my body with oxygen, and how you can actually feel like the tingling. It's probably similar to runner's high. I've never run. I'm not a jogger, but so I've never experienced runner's high, but I would imagine that is what it is. And we can live in that state all the time. It doesn't need to be only when we're running, right? That our breath floods our body, it releases endorphins, and the hormone profile. I think usually we're used to living life in a hormone profile of like either ambivalence or stress, right? It's kind of, especially in today's society, especially during the pandemic, I think it has pushed everybody into a higher state of stress. Mm-hmm. And so then some people have responded by embracing it, and some people have responded by changing their habits. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to change our habits and give our bodies the nutrition of oxygen, aside from what we eat, right? To live better, to have a better quality of life. And what if you could walk around tingling all the time because you're like full of fresh oxygen all the time because you've changed your breathing habits? That one little thing, right, that you can control. How much better are your cells going to function when they have fresh oxygen all the time? I should have done breath work before the show, and then I wouldn't be flubbing all these words. Like I'm like stuttering. I don't know what's happening.
But I think you're right. We have this. We don't pay attention to our breath. We're not aware of how our breath affects our state of being. And when we get into these high anxiety situations, we can't catch our breath, right? When you first jump into the water, when you first get into the ice bath, right? The first thing, it's like the shock where you're like,
oh yeah,
you take these really short breaths and you're not getting the full oxygen.
Yeah.
And yesterday when we were in the Temazcal, at one point, I think you were having a rough time. You were struggling through it. And Jason said, deep, expansive breaths. And just the fact that the word expansive, it shifts the way you breathe, right? The thought of how you breathe. Sometimes we're just breathing like these short, shallow breaths, and think about the expansion of it. Think about opening your lungs up, about having this flood of oxygen into your body and how that expands your cells, how it expands your brain, your consciousness. That breath is so important. Oh, see, that's amazing. Oh, you suffer from allergies. So, maybe the breath work, a more consistent breath work practice would help with that.
I'm all stuffed up right now.
So I think we don't realize that we have all of these tools available to us at all times, right? We have access to breathing all the time. It's not, it's not something that's out of our availability. You don't need anything. You don't need special tools for that. Just a matter of learning how to breathe. Pay attention to your breath. Be aware of how you're breathing. I find myself in meditations, or I recently started taking a womb wisdom class, and we were doing a meditation with our womb, and the teacher said, remember your breath. And I just was like, oh my God, I am not breathing right now. I was listening to the prompts and I was having trouble breathing. I was just in this state of I don't know, like lost in the thoughts. My thoughts stopped my breathing. And it's interesting when we start paying attention to these things, how our breath is affected by our moods. Sometimes we're thinking so much that we're not breathing, and we think we're doing all this work by thinking. But if we just take a moment and get back into our breath, everything clarifies, right? Everything opens up. When you're stressed out, you're thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow. If you stop and just think about this breath, this moment right now, everything else just calms down, like nothing else exists. And it's really fascinating how important the breath is. And I don't think I had realized it. I mean, I've known the importance of breath work, the benefits of breath work. Being in this situation with the Temazcal, I think I felt it even more so. Like I integrated that a lot more.
It drives the lesson home more.
Yes.
When you're like sweating or you're in the ice and you feel that existential crisis of like, oh, am I going to die here? Am I going to get burnt up? Or am I going to freeze to death? It like pushes you to put that in action. It's one thing to know it on an intellectual level, or to believe it. And it's a totally different thing when you're implementing it for what your ego thinks or your reptilian brain thinks is for your survival, right? In our conscious brains, we know we're not going to die from getting into the ice or the sweat lodge. But our fight or flight, our reptilian brain does not know that difference. It doesn't think in the nuance that our frontal cortex does. So it's really important to experience it so that you can embody it on a deeper level. And I think you mentioned our thoughts affecting our breath, but it's also our posture that affects our breath. If you're like hunched over and you're compressing your chest, your lungs don't have as much capacity to expand. But if you sit up, I mean, that's what lotus position is about, right? You sit up, you put your shoulders back, you expand your chest. Now you have more, your lungs have more room to take in more oxygen and then pump that oxygen to all your cells. So physical posture is another way that we in modern society limit our breathing and our oxygen intake, because we have terrible posture in general. You know, aside from maybe people that are into physical fitness, right? I mean, for me, well, maybe I should just speak for myself. My posture has been terrible. Just completely unconscious, walking around slouched, and I mean, that was one of the things I learned at Convergence. They were talking about, they're coming from the perspective of functional patterns. It's basically a practice that I would describe as somewhere between yoga and like weightlifting. It's kind of going back to how the body's supposed to function, what patterns, like how we walk. So one of the first things they tell you in functional patterns is that men tend to walk with their genitals out, leading the way. But how we're supposed to, our posture is supposed to look is more like a gorilla. Our genitals, our rear end is out, and our genitals are tucked, and our chest is out, and we lead with our chest. And that's how our bodies are supposed to walk. But how many people walk like that? I know for me, she makes fun of me all the time. Like, I'll be in the elevator leaning, and she's like, "What are you doing? Are you like showing off your pelvis? What's happening down there? Like, what's going on? You trying to impress somebody?" So yeah, I mean, this is a problem, and luckily now the consciousness is starting to expand, and people are starting to learn these things, and it's weird to practice proper posture is strange.
Yeah,
it feels strange. It's tiring. My body, my muscles are not used to walking with proper posture. They're used to walking with my genitals leading the way. So to reprogram it, which I have been trying to do when I'm walking, I get like little tension in my lower back. Like I feel the muscles are like sore from trying to maintain that posture. And that will be for a couple of weeks, I guess, until I get back to, the right way, the right posture. So.
And then that will start to feel good.
Yeah. It's all connected. All this, right, from a sweat lodge.
Yeah.
All these lessons becoming real, and like really the understanding of it, how it all ties together, has really been like so powerful. And it's really, some of it's happening right now as you're watching. These dots are connecting.
Yeah, I mean, and we had a second part to the we had a second ceremony after that, which we'll talk about once we finish integrating that as well. Yeah. I wanted to get to Trisha's question. She's asking about people with asthma. I think depending on the person leading the sweat lodge, they can tell you, they can tailor it to a particular person's needs. They use particular herbs for the sweat lodge, so perhaps they would use something that would be beneficial. I think that there are benefits to going to a sweat lodge when you have issues like asthma. I think that this will help open up, again, the breathing, help open up the lungs. So this is something that I would recommend speaking to the particular practitioner of the sweat lodge, because then they can tailor it to his specific needs.
And your doctor. This is not medical advice.
Yeah.
This is just our opinion. So make sure you check with your doctor before you do anything. Of course, we have to throw that disclaimer in. But yeah, I think it could be beneficial. I think probably starting with breath work would be a good idea before attempting the sweat lodge or the ice bath. If you do a few minutes of breath work every day, and then you can add a few minutes to it, as time goes on, you may even be able to, I don't want the FDA to shut us down, but maybe you could cure your asthma. Maybe. But what do I know? I'm not a doctor, and I'm not licensed by the FDA or the ADA or whoever else gets to bestow those honors on people. But anyway.
But yeah, there's, for example, the Wim Hof app that has guided breathing exercises. I think they have like 5 that are free, and then you can sign up for the app, and basically he just guides you through the breathing, and you hold your breath, and it's really great. Those are the breathing exercises that we do when you go to the ice bath, and it's really fascinating. Once you do a few rounds of that type of breath work, like you said, your hands start tingling, your body almost convulses a little bit. It's getting oxygen into the areas that your body normally doesn't get oxygen.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I want to mention that sometimes when you do these things, you'll have like these little muscle spasms all over your body, and sometimes they're painful. But what that is you're waking up tissue that is atrophied or just not functioning properly. You may have like amino acids built up, that like when you work out and you feel sore, right? Like when you're getting the oxygen in and it's purging out some of that stuff, it's causing like the cell function to improve, like autophagy, which is removing toxins and recycling them for energy, or expelling them if they can't be used. All those processes start to happen. And so, yeah, you get little like muscle spasms, but that's how you know it's working. It's uncomfortable, and I'm not someone that likes to be uncomfortable. So I get it. But it's when I feel those things, I just thank my body for working. I'm like, okay, I feel this little pain. I know that you're trying to fix something. So thank you for doing what you do. And we move on.
Yeah. I also think as I'm learning more, as I'm reconnecting to a lot of this ancestral wisdom, I realize a lot of our health issues have to do with our emotional state. Trisha, I would recommend maybe looking into traditional Chinese medicine, Mexican traditional medicine. There's a lot of information, like the lungs hold a lot of sadness and grief. So maybe looking at the emotional aspects that lead up to certain health issues. There's anger is stored in the kidney. So when we have kidney issues, the liver. So when we have liver issues, it's time to look at what's my emotional state looking like. All of these things, the stomach holds unprocessed emotions. So what hasn't been digested in our emotional self that is leading to stomach issues and little things like that. These are our traditional medicines that have been around for centuries, and they've worked. It's the way that a lot of our ancestors were living, and a lot of medicine people would ask you, well, what's your emotional life like? And I've had some of my hormonal issues where I've spoken to traditional healers, and they'll ask me, well, what's going on with this or what's going on with that? And when they I was speaking to one of my teachers, and I booked a session with her, and the very first thing she said is like, what's going on with your boundaries? And she brought up a specific issue that I was like, oh my God, this is so obvious. Yes, my boundaries are lacking here, and this is causing this issue. And I set the intention of, okay, I'm going to be more strict with my boundaries. I'm going to work on this. And my health issue was resolved immediately. And so a lot of it is energetic. A lot of it is our own emotional health, our energetic health. So it's really important to look at that stuff to see where we are emotionally, where we are, what things we're not dealing with or looking at, that our body is trying to tell us to look at it. Our body is here to signal things. We live in a society where we want to just shut it down. I have a headache, I'm going to take a pill and not deal with the headache, instead of looking at what this headache's trying to tell me. Is it trying to tell me that I'm dehydrated, that I should drink more water, that I should have some coconut water, that my cells need more oxygen? What is it telling me? If I take that pill to get the headache to go away, I don't deal with the real issue, and that continues to build up. And so our body is extremely intelligent. It's constantly communicating with us the things that we need to look at. And when you start looking at, on the internet, you could look at traditional Chinese medicine, and they'll show you all of the energy points, what organs hold which emotions, and you can start tracing it. And I'm not saying you're going to fully heal yourself that way. You can always go to a traditional medicine, a certified traditional Chinese medicine doctor, and get a lot more information if you need it. But it doesn't hurt to start taking a look at those things and see where you can help yourself, right? So
yeah, that's good. That's good advice.
I'm sorry, I just went on a little bit of a rant.
No, I think it was excellent. And I was going to say, for those who think maybe this sounds a little woo-woo, there's a lot of science that's behind it. It really is backed up by science. I mean, if you think about it, you know, when you said, oh, it's like energetic, and our emotions, it comes from our emotions. But if you're feeling depressed, you're not going to be breathing as much. Your breath, like I said, you're going to be hunched over. Your breath is going to be shallow. So the oxygen levels in your cells is going to decrease. So cellular function is going to decrease. I mean, it's just common sense.
And when we experience different emotions, we release different hormones. And if we're experiencing these emotions consistently, it's going to create an imbalance in those hormones as well. And those imbalances create issues within our bodily functions.
So anger releases certain hormones that tax the liver.
Exactly.
Sadness releases certain hormones that tax the lungs. I mean, this is the scientific kind of aspect to it. So it's not like this is just woo-woo. We're talking about magic. If you get angry, it magically hurts your liver. No, right? I mean, there's a lot of biochemistry involved here.
Yes, of course. And again, a lot of the thing is that it's not always recognized by our traditional science. Now,
when was the last time your MD asked you about your emotions?
Yeah, it's true. And I think now we're starting to see science kind of catch up to it and recognize certain things. They're starting to recognize certain old ways of medicine, and they're starting to recognize traditional Chinese medicine. I mean, I took a course in Mexican traditional medicine and saw a lot of the similarities with traditional Chinese medicine, and saw that a lot of it is proven by science, like by modern science. They're able to see certain things now that my ancestors would have, known just because it was common sense to them, right? They had more of this connection with the body. They could listen to the body. And that's where we go back to the breath again. When you're able to sink into your breath, to pay attention to the way that you're breathing, you're able to notice the different aches and pains in your body that perhaps you're not always aware of. We live in such a fast-paced environment. We're busy with social media. We're busy with TV. We're busy with all of the things happening in the world that we don't stop to tune into our bodies to see what our bodies are trying to tell us. And if we're not listening to our bodies, how can we be out there trying to solve all the problems in the world, right? We need to put on our oxygen mask first. And by doing so, we need to breathe. We need to step into the breath, expansive breaths, like Jason says. Let the oxygen flow through all of your body and see what your body has to say to you. And I mean, it's kind of blowing my mind right now. We're kind of doing the integration work of yesterday's Sweat Lodge right here with you guys. Yeah. This is kind of the process, and us being able to talk it out helps us understand certain things that we experienced yesterday. But this is all what comes out of one Sweat Lodge. I mean, we obviously plan on going back, or at least I plan on going back. We were actually having this conversation with the facilitators yesterday that I've been doing a lot of research about fertility and birth work, and I saw that there's a whole movement of birth workers, of women who are giving birth in sweat lodges. And this was a practice back in the ancient days, and it's a practice that's coming back now. And one of the facilitators was saying yesterday, she was like, yeah, when they go into the sweat lodge in 15 minutes, the baby's out. This is a quick thing because you're in there. There's the heat. There's the hormones that you're releasing in the sweat lodge help the transition become so much easier. Of course, it needs to be with somebody who is a practitioner, who has the knowledge, right? Who's a lot of unfortunately, people start hearing about these ideas and they're like, oh, I'm going to start doing this. When you have the ancestral wisdom, when it's been passed down to you from generation to generation to generation, there are so many things that you know that it's almost impossible to teach to somebody else, right? It's almost like you have to be born into the lineage or be a part of the lineage or be in the lineage for a long time to understand how the process works. But these are ancient practices that have been working for so many years. And I'm so excited to see a lot of it come back, especially to be able to experience it and see the benefits of it, to feel the difference in myself from when I went into the sweat lodge and when I came out. So it's super exciting. And if you have an opportunity to do so, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah. And if you're in the New York City area and you want to experience a Temazcal, reach out to us and, we can hook you up with our medicine man.
All right. Well, I think we...
Yeah. Liza is asking how long I was in the ice bath. My longest was 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
The ice bath is a lot quicker. Yeah.
The goal was 2 minutes. I pushed myself to 2:45.
Oh, California. I'm sure plenty. There are plenty of Temazcal or sweat lodges in the California area.
Yeah. You know what? Honestly, I would go on Instagram and start looking, and you can find in Southern California, especially. Just you want to not just pick anybody. You want to kind of do a little bit of research about the lineage and educate yourself on it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important to feel safe with the people that you're going into the sweat lodge with. To feel. I mean, I think even before we went into the sweat lodge, I already felt like we were with family.
Yeah.
And that's really special and important. Because you don't have that fear of, oh my God, if something happens, are these people going to be there for me? So definitely do your research when going to any type of healing ceremony. I mean, even with the ice bath, I think we have a really great support team there, and that's super important. Things can be very stressful. Some of these healing modalities can be very traumatic if not done with the right people. So it's very important to find somebody that aligns with your values, with your way of thinking, so that you can feel safe and
Check. Can you guys hear us?
I think so. Sorry, I think we might have lost audio for a second. We're back.
We got it back. All right, so I have a little bit of homework for you guys. Give me 1 second. All right.
Oh, we're giving people homework now.
Yep, giving you guys homework. So let me just turn that off. For the next episode, we're going to be talking about an exciting natural medicine, and we want you to Google it. Look it up. Google Bufo alvarius. And we're going to have our next show. I think the next show is going to be on that. We had that experience yesterday as well. We're still integrating from that, so we didn't really want to talk too much about it, but we wanted to give you a little teaser. So Google Bufo alvarius, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us this week. Thank you for your questions. If you have any more questions about this topic, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer as many questions as we can. And Danny's going to talk about our social media.
Yep, sure. We kind of talk about this every week, but we're on all the major big tech platforms. However, I like to promote Minds.com, Float app, and Odyssey.com because, they just keep getting worse and worse with the censorship on the internet of quote unquote misinformation. in the beginning of the pandemic, they were saying taking vitamin C is a conspiracy theory to help prevent against COVID. So we like to promote these apps because they are privacy driven. They do not sell your information, and they are censorship free. So we really appreciate that. And we want to promote these. Minds.com, Float app, and Odyssey.com are the three that we like the best. So check them out if you're not already on them. And, you know, we're probably eventually at some point just going to stop Facebook altogether. But, you know, I guess for right now, to be honest, that's where most of the eyeballs are coming from. So to get the message out, it's kind of like, I don't know if it's a necessary evil, but for now, anyway, we'll continue. But, you know, Facebook is just satanic in my opinion. So Minds.com, Float app, and Odyssey. Check those out. That's my rant.
I like to think that we're transmuting the energy on Facebook and we're bringing positive information onto it.
Okay.
So
that's a way to look at it. Eventually, I'm sure they're going to censor us, though, for, you know, if the algorithm gets smart enough to listen to our whole broadcast, they're going to be like, oh no, Bufalo virus, no way. Can't talk about that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back. Next
2
week,
weeks.
I guess, or 2 weeks?
2 weeks. We promise.
All right. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you, and have a great Sovereign Sunday.
Take care, everybody. Love you guys.
Bye.